Coming up on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto this week, a federal ban on all hemp products with THC? That's what's on the floor of Congress now as prohibitionists gather momentum towards blowing up the billion-dollar hemp industry that they created with the 2018 Farm Bill.
It means that we're pushing hemp-derived THC products into the underground market further rather than regulating these products, which is what needs to happen.
Plus, North Carolina Governor Josh Stein decides that moving forward with cannabis legalization makes revenue sense for his state while tax dollars fuel political movement. And with more Americans using cannabis now than ever before, it's the silver seniors who are leading this green wave with an over 40% increase in usage from that group. And another California legislative committee votes unanimously to block that controversial tax increase scheduled for July 1st. Plus, Whoopi Goldberg makes a stop at the annual Cannabis Means Business Conference in New York City as the keynote interview with CNBC's Tim Seymour at the Jaillet Center.
But I'm not here to please everybody. I'm just here to make offerings and say, here are some things that I'm into. Check them out if you want to.
Meanwhile, up the road in Northampton, Massachusetts, it was the third annual Flower Expo, where that popular trade show may have found a permanent home in that progressive city.
We love Northampton. It's just really an incredible new town that we're in, and the venue is great.
All that and international news, plus coast-to-coast cannabis news coverage on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto, next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast News, WPCM TV's production of the fight to end cannabis prohibition. I'm Alaina Pinto. Here's our weekly plea for you to download our app that is available on Google Play and the App Store. You can just scan the QR code on the screen to connect and then search PCM space TV, and you will get access to the most important cannabis reform stories over the past 4 years. Okay, first up, all eyes continue to be focused on Washington, D.C. and Congress, and now it's the debate on the president's budget bill. A House subcommittee led by prohibitionist Andy Harris, a Republican Maryland congressman. He proposed an amendment to the budget bill that would ban THC-infused products at the federal level. That passed by a 7-5 partisan vote, and that amendment proposal now moves on to the Appropriation S Committee before it can advance to the House floor for debate. This amendment basically recreates prohibition of a product that was created by the 2018 Farm Bill and gives hemp a new definition. If this happens, infused beverages, hemp and THCA products that have fueled a billion-dollar unregulated industry will be shut down. The National Cannabis Industry Association, one of the leading lobby groups in our nation's capital for cannabinoid products, they responded with a simple plea. Regulation, yes. Prohibition, no. Here's their executive director, Aaron Smith, with more.
So, Aaron, why don't you take this second, please, and tell the people what you said in your release and why this is a very scary development in the reform world.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, we've got the big, beautiful budget bill under consideration on the House side right now, and a subcommittee in the Appropriations House Appropriations Committee, led by Andy Harris, by the way, who's a congressman from Maryland who has kind of made cannabis prohibition one of his cause celebs, which I think he's probably the only one left in Congress doing that. He's introduced an amendment or a provision in the bill that would redefine hemp as saying it has to not have any quantifiable amount of THC. So what that means is anything, which it's hard to even say what that means because there's, you can buy cereal at Whole Foods that has some quantifiable amount of THC. But practically the real concern is that it means that we're pushing hemp-derived THC products into the underground market further rather than regulating these products, which is what needs to happen. So, this is trying to hand a big win over to the drug cartels instead of small businesses that should be able to to responsibly distribute these products.
Aaron joins our executive producer, Jimmy Young, every week on the NCIA's Voice of Cannabis podcast that is presented by Buds Group Consultants in the tri-state area. And if you haven't checked it out or downloaded the last one, Aaron and Jimmy have a great conversation with Dina, the Congresswoman co-sponsor on the States Act 2.0 that outlines a pathway towards federal legalization for the cannabis sativa plant. In the meantime, sales continue and merger and acquisitions continue as well, and business and networking events continue to be held as the industry faces one of its biggest challenges since reform began over 12 years ago. We've already heard the response on the proposed THC hemp ban from the NCIA, so now let's check in with our hemp reporter with the latest from Texas, another hemp battlefield. Our hemp guy is Kerry Hinkle, and he's also a new dad. Congratulations, Kerry. Here he is.
Hi, everyone. This is Kerry Hinkle with Bayou City Hemp out of Houston, Texas, and this is your hemp report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. This week, Congressman Andy Harris, a longtime critic of both marijuana and hemp-derived THC, has once again taken aim at our industry. He is the chairman of the House Agriculture Appropriations Subcommittee, in a powerful position known in D.C. as a cardinal. Congressman Harris has once again inserted language into his federal budget proposal that would ban all hemp products that contain any amount of THC. This includes controversial products like THCA flower or Delta 8, but it also includes non-controversial products like a full-spectrum CBD tincture that a little old lady might use to help her get through her day. Now, this isn't the first attempt at banning or restricting hemp products at the federal level in the last few years. Last year, a similar amendment was added by Congresswoman Mary Miller from Illinois into the House version of the Farm Bill, which would have had a similar impact in that it banned all products that contained any quantifiable amount of THC. Now, give Congressman Harris a little bit of credit. His language is a little tighter in that it allows HHS to work with the USDA to define what those quantifiable levels of THC means. So this gives the federal government a little bit more wiggle room in this definition. And it also specifically calls out industrial hemp, saying that rope and other industrial uses of the hemp crop are not impacted by this language. Now, farmers of hemp will push back. It is impossible to grow the crop without some amounts of THC. So we as an industry still feel that this is quite detrimental to the industrial side of the industry. Now, one saving grace is these agriculture appropriations bills have not passed in several years. For over a decade now, Congress has relied on temporary spending bills or continuing resolutions, often called CRs, to continue funding without more controversial aspects to be added to the spending bill. So it has now left the subcommittee on a 9-7 vote. And if it does make it to the full House, there are plenty of time to change and advocate for amendments in that agriculture appropriations bill specific to hemp. And then if it made it all the way over to the Senate and their Senate committee and then the full Senate, there's a lot of steps in this process before this would ever become law. So we are monitoring and watching as this bill moves forward, but if past indications and failed attempts to ban our industry at the federal level are anything to lean on, we feel confident that this will not go anywhere, but still important to track. Again, I'm Kerry Hinkle. This was my hemp report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. We'll see you next week.
Our federal cannabis reform reporter is Andrew Bellinger, and he has more on what is going on with the president's spending bill that now could be the vehicle that could eliminate the hot hemp and THC-infused beverage industry.
I'm Andrew Bellinger with the Washington, D.C. report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. For the second time in his presidency, Donald Trump is proposing to eliminate federal protections that prevent the Justice Department from interfering with state medical cannabis programs. This move comes as a surprise to industry stakeholders who supported Trump based on his campaign endorsements of cannabis rescheduling, banking reform, and even Florida's adult use cannabis ballot initiative last year. The budget request seeks to remove a congressional rider that has protected state medical cannabis laws since 2014, a protection that Congress has consistently maintained regardless of which president requested its removal. During his first term, Trump made similar requests annually and even issued statements suggesting he might ignore the protections, citing this constitutional duty to faithfully execute federal laws. Now, cannabis advocates are particularly frustrated given Trump's campaign rhetoric. There's a significant disconnect between what was promised on the campaign trail and what we're seeing in this budget, says one industry representative. The president had previously endorsed rescheduling cannabis and expanding banking access for cannabis businesses. The budget also maintains restrictions preventing Washington, D.C. from using local taxpayer funds to implement adult use cannabis sales. Representative Eleanor Holmes Norton continues her fight against this provision, while the White House recently called D.C.'s cannabis reforms a failed policy that opened the door to disorder. Adding to the complexity is Trump's nominee for DEA Administrator Terrence Cole, who has expressed concerns about cannabis's dangers, but calls the ongoing rescheduling review as first priority if confirmed. Now, Cole refuses to commit to any specific outcome, saying he'll consult with the DEA personnel, but before making decisions, interestingly enough, targeting medical cannabis protections, and Trump's budget continues to protect state hemp programs, a contradiction that highlights the administration's selective approach to cannabis policy. Congress is expected to reject Trump's request to eliminate medical cannabis protections, maintaining the bipartisan support that these measures have enjoyed for over a decade. However, this proposal creates uncertainty for the state programs and patients who rely on medical cannabis access. The ultimate direction of federal cannabis policy will likely depend on congressional action and the ongoing rescheduling review process initiated under the Biden administration. But for now, cannabis advocates are left wondering whether the campaign promises will translate into actual reform. Well, that's the Washington, D.C. report. I'm Andrew Barringer, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
The race to become the 25th adult use legal state in the United States continues and now has a surprising new contestant. It's North Carolina. This is another state with a vibrant THC-infused hemp market, but some of the most strict prohibition laws in the country. Their governor, Josh Stein, went on record with an executive order covering the North Carolina Advisory Council on Cannabis. There will be 30 members, including lawmakers, law enforcement leaders, agricultural stakeholders, health and medical experts, trial representatives, and industry advocates to explore possible regulatory models for adult use guidelines for both sides of this plant medicine. Now let's check in with Michigan to see what's going on in that state with Amie Carter.
I'm Amie Carter with Michigan Weedsters, bringing you this week's Michigan report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Michigan lawmakers are still eyeing bills to allow roadside saliva testing for THC, raising eyebrows amongst experts. Critics warn of a 25% error rate from past tests and that THC presence doesn't prove impairment, leading to fears of unjust arrests. Over on the west side, a popular Niles restaurant is leaving for Indiana, paving the way for a new Happy Days dispensary. A Michigan resident and long-term green card holder found himself in federal custody for almost 2 months due to an older cannabis possession charge. This occurred despite his legal marriage to a U.S. citizen and raising 3 children in Ypsilanti. Interestingly, he and his wife previously supported Donald Trump, who prioritized immigration enforcement in his campaign and policies. Iosco County, Michigan, police found over 5,000 cannabis plants worth $5 million at an illegal grow operation in Iosco County. 4 Chinese nationals face charges linked to an international crime ring. A Michigan Marine Corps spouse just dodged serious time after attempting to sneak liquid cannabis into Japan using toy boxes as her cover. Originally handed a 2-year prison sentence, with hard labor, she managed to escape incarceration by demonstrating remorse and having a clean slate. As much as 30% of cannabis in Michigan fails safety testing at first, but much of it gets remediated and sold without any disclosure about its moldy past. Despite protests from the industry, state regulators continue to turn a blind eye to calls for increased transparency, according to MLive. That is it for this week. I am Amie Carter with Michigan Weedsters for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
There is a bizarre story out of Maryland this week. Someone hacked into a Google Maps account and created a phony posting for an adult use cannabis dispensary in a quiet neighborhood. And needless to say, it was a surprise for people who showed up looking for it, while the homeowners dealt with the unexpected and unwanted attention. Here's Christopher Bright in Maryland.
Hey, how you doing? I'm Christopher Bright from the Enlightening Voice. Welcome to Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'll be bringing you the latest cannabis headlines from Maryland. Governor Wes Moore has announced a new round of funding through the Maryland Department of Commerce Cannabis Business Assistance Fund, marking the fourth initiative to support small businesses and entrepreneurs in Maryland's adult use cannabis industry. The governor expressed pride in diversifying the sector, stating that this effort enhances equity and economic growth, delivering benefits across the entire state. The grant targets new social equity cannabis businesses licensees that were selected last year via the Maryland Cannabis Administration lottery system. Over 200 applicants were chosen, including micro and standard growers, processors, and dispensaries. Maryland's Commerce Secretary Harry Coker Jr. emphasized the fund's role in invigorating small, minority, and women-owned businesses, creating more opportunities in this growing industry. Maryland Cannabis Industry Director Tabitha Robinson noted the funds support key expenses like employee training, equipment, and payroll. The program has already awarded over $45 million to help new entrants with startup funding, leveling the playing field for social equity entrepreneurs, according to Audrey Johnson, Executive Director of the Maryland Office of Social Equity. And now we have our content creator of the week. I would like to shine a spotlight on Olga Hall, aka The Plant Nurse. Her IG at The Plant Nurse is a plethora of information to learn from cannabis and mushroom information to her services as the lowest price cannabis certification provider, or it's just as a nurse practitioner. I just were certified for myself for $45. Please give her a follow and be sure to schedule a consultation for all your cannabis health needs. And that's all for this week's Maryland Cannabis Report. I'm Christopher Bright from the Enlightening Voice, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
There is still an impending deadline for July 1st for another tax hike on the California cannabis industry. In 2022, Governor Gavin Newsom used his executive powers to implement an emergency increase when the industry did not reach projected revenue and tax goals. But now at 15%, it's supposed to go up to 19% by that July 1st date. This week, the California Assembly, a group of 80 elected officials in the lower house of the legislative branch of that state, has voted unanimously to stop that tax increase. The state eliminated the cultivation tax in 2022, so that impacted the tax totals collected, and now the governor wants to make it up by increasing total taxes on the industry. Needless to say, this did not go over well in his state, and now his own legislature is resisting his solution to this tax discrepancy. Of course, it hasn't helped that first quarter legal sales have decreased in California to their lowest point since 2020. With more from California, here's Dina Nagib.
I'm Dina Nagib, Principal Consultant at Grass Goddess Consulting, here to give you the latest developments in California for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. First off, AB 564 swept the Assembly floor with a vote of 74-0. The bill will block the excise tax increase from 15% to 19%, which has been set to happen on July 1st. But is it a little too late? At this point, the bill won't take effect until the start of next year, and the excise tax will still increase in July. There is a way to incorporate it into the budget trailer bill so that the increase doesn't happen, and it's important that Californians stay vigilant and let Sacramento know that this is critical for our industry. But let's also not forget to celebrate good news, because a landslide vote means that our voices are being heard. Stay tuned. In other news, legal cannabis sales in California experienced an 11% decline during the first quarter of this year, which is the largest decline in the history of legal sales in this state. This is in a large part due to overtaxation, which has caused the majority of sales to occur outside of the legal market, according to the Department of Cannabis Control. Hopefully, with AB 564 in place, the industry can figure out how to take back the majority of sales and become what we all hope legalization would look like. That's it for California news. I'm Dina Nagib with Grass Goddess Consulting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
That'll do it for the A block or first section of our weekly Cannabis Coast to Coast news show. Coming up next, our international news segment with new countries moving towards reform. And later on PCM TV, founder Jimmy Young spent a few days in Western Massachusetts at the 3rd annual Flower Expo, one of the most popular pro-cannabis business trade shows and networking events every year in the Northeast and now expanding into the Midwest. Cannabis Coast to Coast news continues after this.
Counting Buds has grown into Buds Group, the same award-winning quality, now with more service offerings. Buds Group, your best buds in the biz.
Looking for PR that over-delivers on expectations? At Maverick Public Relations, they pair big agency experience with personalized attention. From launching award-winning brands to securing top-tier media hits, their data-driven communications team helps visionary leaders and entrepreneurs rise above the media noise. Maverick PR is responsive, collaborative, and relentless about results and ROI. Visit themaverickpr.com and make headlines together.
Welcome back to Cannabis Coast to Coast news for this week. I'm Alaina Pinto. Now it's time for our international news block. The Czech Republic started the process for decriminalizing cannabis at the federal level. A bill was passed with 142 yes votes out of 159 to allow for possession at home of 100 grams of cannabis and 25 grams or just under 1 ounce of cannabis on your possession. It also has some provisions for growing at home, but limits that growth to just 3 plants per dwelling. And this bill moves on to the Czech Senate for approval and perhaps some amendments. So there's that. Now we start off our B block with Ben Stevens in Europe. He has more on that story from the UK as England moves to making changes in their cannabis laws.
I'm Ben Stevens, the editor of Business of Cannabis, with this week's news from Europe for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Cannabis reform is back in the spotlight in a big way here in the UK this week as a landmark new report recommended the decriminalisation of cannabis possession, and a long-awaited review into medical cannabis has been requested by the government. The final report of the London Drugs Commission, led by former Justice Secretary Lord Charlie Falconer, has concluded that current cannabis laws are not fit for purpose, and that the possession of cannabis for personal use should no longer be a criminal offence. While stopping short of calling for full legalisation, the report did recommend cannabis be reclassified, moving it out of the Misuse of Drugs Act and into the Psychoactive Substances Act, effectively decriminalising personal possession while keeping production and supply illegal. The report also highlights the disproportionate impact of cannabis policing on ethnic minorities, an issue seen around the world, with black Londoners far more likely to be stopped and searched by police despite being no more likely to be carrying cannabis. Meanwhile, 7 years after it was legalised, the UK government has finally commissioned a formal review into the state of the UK's booming medical cannabis sector. While the private market for cannabis-based medicines has grown with over 300,000 prescriptions issued in the past year alone, NHS, the National Health Service access that is free, remains extremely limited, forcing many patients to turn to costly private care or illegal sources. Industry leaders and patient advocates say that this latest review must lead to action, not just more analysis. On this point, Professor Trevor Jones of the Cannabis Research and Development Group also pointed out that many of the points have already been covered in previous reports by the ACMD, stating that while the news is welcome, we cannot ignore the practical solutions that have been sitting on ministers' desks for years. For families of children with severe epilepsy, the stakes remain painfully high. Many are still paying thousands a month for treatment that they believe should be free on the NHS. That's all from me for this week. I'm Ben Stevens, the editor of Business of Cannabis, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
There's been a lot of merger and acquisition activity in the cannabis industry over the past week. One of the most successful recruitment agencies in the country is Vangst out of Denver, Colorado. This week, they were the ones making the acquisition. In this case, Vangst acquired 7 staffing and employment solutions, making it their third company acquisition over the past 13 months. Vangst now owns staffing groups in California, Oregon, and Colorado. Here in New England, in Connecticut, a cannabis company in that state called Butter, that's Budr, they have bought 3 more dispensaries in that state, including 4 from MSO, the Botanist. And now Butter operates 7 total cannabis stores in the Nutmeg State. No terms were announced. But in Virginia, there's been a battle between a local firefighter and the state over the rights given to medical cannabis patients who consume during private off-duty hours. A similar precedent happened in Jersey City, New Jersey last year. And this focus is on Virginia right now, where Joe Parsons has this story in his state report this week.
I'm Joe Parsons with the Virginia Cannabis Connection from Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 3WV and reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. A Norfolk City firefighter is attempting to challenge his dismissal for off-duty medical cannabis use. Brandon Beltane had dreamed of becoming a firefighter ever since he was a little boy and saw the 1991 classic movie Backdraft. And in 2018, he got his dream in Norfolk, Virginia. However, when he followed policy and reported that he had a medical card in August of 2022, he had struggles with HR that ultimately led to his dismissal, even though Virginia law had already enacted a law to protect state workers from termination due to off-duty cannabis use. After almost 3 years of fighting the case, his grievance will finally be heard this week in Virginia. Now, Virginia needs more laws enacted to protect not just state workers, but everyone in the Commonwealth, considering that cannabis is legal for both medical and recreational use. Beltane was using cannabis to deal with his depression, anxiety, and ADHD. This is very common in the life of a firefighter, as it's one of the highest stress level jobs in America. He had been taking prescription medications prior, but the severe side effects interfered with his personal and professional work. So when the city told him he could still lose his job, he continued to use cannabis, especially after stressful shifts. He was thinking the newly enacted laws would protect him. His case is important as it'll set a precedent on how similar cases will be handled in the future. He does intend to file a civil suit if his current case is unsuccessful. I personally wish him the very best in hopes that he gets to return to duty as soon as possible. Well, that's going to do it for this week from Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 3WV in Charlottesville, and reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Joe Parsons. Until next time, stay lifted.
Hey, I'm Jill Goldsberry here with the New Jersey Cannabis Report for Coast to Coast Cannabis News. And guys, it's about to be the summer of cannabis, and I've got the highlights of some of the things that have kicked it off. First, I had a conversation with an organization with the CEO of a mission called I Love Growing Marijuana. I Love Growing Marijuana was here in the area during 420 for their U.S. Home Grow Tour. I got a chance to speak with Ernst Russhoven, the CEO, and we had a little conversation. I got his thoughts on the state of home grow in New Jersey and the state of home grow in general in this country during our cannabis revolution here. And you'll be very interested in hearing what he has to say. And I Love Growing Marijuana is a mission that aims to match or build relationships between seasoned cultivators and those who are newcomers and want to learn more about growing their own cannabis. So, and in other news in New Jersey, we have some celebrity power here, okay? Faye Coleman, who is the owner, CEO, and founder of Pure Pure Genesis dispensary in New Jersey. She has partnered with Whoopi Goldberg to launch Whoopi, which is a 10 milligram THC drink. It's going to be available nationally soon. The drink is a cross between, I would say it's kind of like an Arnold Palmer, but it's got the THC in it. So it's a lemonade and iced tea drink. There's a second drink that is a CBD-based drink that's called Pina Colada. It's like a pina colada with a kick. Both of them are delicious. You definitely have to try it if you get a chance. And we also have some new, I guess you could say we're about to have some movie stars in the cannabis industry. This is going to be very exciting. Okay, Kiss My Grass, the documentary by Mary Pryor. You all know Mary Pryor, entrepreneur, social justice, activist for the cannabis industry. She has produced a film called Kiss My Grass. It showed this week. It opened at the Tribeca Film Festival. And it is featuring New Jersey's own Butter Cake CEO, Martha Figueroa. So, if you get a chance to hit the Tribeca Film Festival, definitely go check it out. It highlights the struggles of Black women in this industry, exposes systemic issues, and also displays the resiliency and what Black women are doing to demand equity in this industry. So, if you get a chance, go see it. Tribeca Film Festival. I'm Jill Goldsberry with the New Jersey Cannabis Report for Coast to Coast Cannabis News.
With the uncertainty about the future of hemp and cash flow slowing down on the retail scene, investment capital has practically dried up, yet anytime you can go and attend an industry trade show, there is optimism and hope. There were two this week. The Cannabis World Congress and Business Expo has changed its name to Cannabis Means Business. That group took over New York City and the Javits Center. On hand there were some major media players, including Whoopi Goldberg and CNBC's Tim Seymour. Check out this lineup of powerful women from the industry, including event organizer Christine Iannuzzi on the far right and Whoopi Goldberg in the middle, with PCM TV friend Kimberly Burns from Tribe Tokes right in the middle there too. There was Cannabis 101 from California streaming live from the floor, and many others.
Where are we going? Where do you want to be? I want to be where I am right now, talking to people, talking to I am. Because the fact that this isn't even happening, you know how long we waited? We're the Javits out there. Where are you at? The Japanese and I mean, but remember what we used to have to hide? I couldn't say what we were doing, and there was so many preconceived ideas about marijuana. And right now, everybody here is showing that there are many, many facets to this marvelous plant.
But up the road in Massachusetts, in Northampton, was the third annual Flower Expo, and it took over the 3-county fairgrounds and welcomed thousands of businesses from all over the country. There were breakout sessions with some of the biggest names in the cannabis business speaking, and even PCM TV founder Jimmy Young live streamed a series of interviews with industry movers and shakers, including Rebecca Maestas Sincere, the VP of marketing for the Bud and Mary's brand out of Iowa. Deirdre Ruvito from Solar Therapeutics and Sean Curley from the Collab Group all joined Jimmy live on the WPCM TV network of distribution platforms. So here's Jimmy with more from the Flower Expo.
Megan Dobro, good to see you. Thank you so much for talking to me. What's so special about the Flower Expo? You've been here before, and what differentiates this show from other trade shows?
Yeah, Flower Expo is great because it's all the right people. It's all B2B. It's got the vibe of we're all hanging out, building relationships, not trying to sell, but just like hanging out together and spending face-to-face time. So it's really fun.
The people at this show respect the industry, don't they?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, everyone's got their own interests, but I think people are here because they love it, and it's not such a jaded crowd.
What differentiates the Flower Expo from other shows in New England or other trade shows in the cannabis space?
Sure, I think the Flower Expo is a great opportunity for the B2B side of things. You know, it's very much dedicated and directed
towards the retailers, the buyers, but then they also add in the component of having the bud tenders here, right? We know the bud tenders make a real big impact when it comes to the purchasing or, decisions that are happening at the front level. So I feel as though they're really doing a great job of bringing all of those people together in a 2-day event.
Well, this is it. We're going to wrap up our week here in Northampton at the Flower Expo, and I've got the brain trust of the Flower Expo right here, even though neither Jason Bello or Kai Brady will actually admit that they are the brain trust, because I think I know who the real brain trust is, but I'm not going to give that. I'm not going to enlighten you. Jason, what's your reaction after the last couple of days here in North? Did it live up to your expectations?
I think it was bigger than my expectations. I mean, it was a phenomenal show. We had over 100 brands exhibiting. I think 370 dispensaries were represented here by both the buyers and bud tenders. Day one was an all-out frenzy. It seemed like deals were getting done. People were selling cannabis, and it was a healthy sign of the industry. But day two, I think the vibes were high, a lot more bud tenders, more fun. And we love Northampton. It's just really an incredible new town that we're in, and the venue is great.
And the music has been awesome.
Awesome.
I recognize this music. That's what I love.
Nice, man.
Right? I can sing all the words, but I'm not gonna. Kai Brady, when you hear Jason rant and rave about the numbers, and you, sir, are involved with all those numbers, not lost on me, how happy are you with how this show turned out, and what's the feedback you got from the people that are your clients?
Oh, I'm very happy with how it turned out. I think it was a great show. I think it's just elevated experience. We keep learning a little bit each and every year, and every aspect was just a little bit elevated, a little bit improved, and it just came together for an awesome vibe. Deals getting done, bud tenders are having a good time, had some great speaking panels as well, so very happy all around.
There you go. And you know what, these shows are pretty amazing, but this is the first Flower Expo in Massachusetts. This is your third, and the other two always had a cloudburst or a harsh thunderstorm at the end of it. And I gotta tell you, I wish I knew Mother Nature, because I could really use a cloudburst right now so that we could, or even jump in a lake somewhere. Would that be okay?
I'm pretty happy about the beautiful sunshine we've had. We're extremely fortunate.
Yeah, I like that. He's very appreciative of what you guys got. So for Kai and Jason, I'm Jimmy. Thank you so much for taking part in what we've done here out in Northampton this year at the Flower Expo. But I think you may see me at other Flower Expos in the future outside of Massachusetts. Are we cool with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are we cool with that?
Absolutely.
We're coming to Michigan and we're coming to Illinois, right? That's right. Woohoo! Two of my favorite Midwest cities. We'll see you there.
Last week, the Chicago Clone Guy reported on a licensing freeze in his state of Illinois. Supposedly, this is just a pause by the state to let the market catch up with the demand. The added addition for this timeout gives more time for social equity licenses to get their operations going with a more realistic timeline. Mark Allen reports on what is going on in that state.
What's up, everybody? I'm Mark Allen, the Chicago Clone Guy, tuning in from just outside Chicago, Illinois. This is Bird. Thanks for tuning in to Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Illinois is always up to something. They decided that they are going to stop issuing adult use cannabis license permits. They have a cap of 500, which means they are going to stop giving out the remaining 130 to help current businesses get established, is what they say, allegedly, to help, these people that are having a slow going and rough economy get going, supposedly. The problem is most of the people with the permits aren't even operational at this point. The state has so many requirements and regulations and red tape to begin with that they've started with that they're not even up and running. For example, 88 companies are permitted to grow craft cannabis in the state of Illinois. 88. Right now, only 21 of those 88 are actually up and running. The reason they're not up and running is because of the bureaucratic and political hoops, red tape, problems that they have to go through. Costs, fees, all the red tape, that was created for them. So I appreciate Illinois trying to help the market, but if they really want to help the market, stop the barriers to entry, reduce the barriers to entry. You don't need to, try to change, hold back the market. They're literally holding back the market to help speed it up. So to me, that makes zero sense. Let's stop it to make it better. But that's what they're going to try now in this state. But that sums it up for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Mark Allen, the Chicago Clone Guy.
I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's Cannabis Stock Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Pipe Dreams is a dispensary in Asbury Park, New Jersey. It just rolled out a new payment system that lets customers buy cannabis with cryptocurrency. The system is powered by PDX Beam, and it converts crypto to cash instantly at checkout. No banks needed, no cash required. So far, about 12 out of 2,000 monthly sales are crypto, but owner Muhammad Heckle says it's just another way not to say no to money. With millions of crypto users and summer tourists flooding the shore, Pipe Dreams is betting this could grow fast, and Heckle even plans to bring crypto to smart vending machines in 4 states. Will crypto be the next big thing for cannabis? For now, it's an early experiment worth watching, and we've discussed crypto as a payment option for the cannabis industry before and how it could work, so I will be keeping you posted on how this is working. And that's this week's Cannabis Stock Report. Reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, I'm Doug Miller.
The first East Coast state to open for adult use of cannabis was our home state of Massachusetts. And now the more than $1 billion a year industry generates millions in state taxes. But it has been plagued by mismanagement, personality clashes, and now the state house is getting involved and might take the responsibilities away from the state treasurer and allow the governor to appoint leadership at the Cannabis Control Commission. With more from Massachusetts, here's Curtis Emery with the Bay State Cannabis Report.
I'm Curtis Emery, a bud tender from Resonate in Worcester, Massachusetts, with the Bay State Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. An understaffed CCC continues to push back voting on social consumption laws here in Massachusetts. The organization announced in December that it would have its decision in mid-2025. However, given the recent vacancies at the CCC, the vote has been pushed back at least twice, with Chairman Bruce Stebbins announcing that the vote will tentatively take place on the June 17th and 18th sessions. An omnibus bill now in front of the state government would attempt to alleviate such roadblocks going forward, changing the number of chairs needed for a quorum from 3 to 2. A continuing story here in Massachusetts, the House passes an act modernizing the Commonwealth's cannabis laws, sending the omnibus bill up to the Senate for a vote. On the table are many measures aiming to change both the state's control over the industry as well as implement changes that will be seen on the dispensary level. Such changes include increasing the adult use weight per day from 1 ounce to 2 ounces, instituting a complaint line on the state level, changing medical marijuana parameters, doing away with vertical integration requirements, as well as opening up dispensary markets for CBD consumables and topicals, and changing laws on THC-derived drinks at the dispensaries.
I'm Matthew Friedlander from Skagit Organics, reporting from my hemp garden with the Washington State Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast. So last week I reported from the Northwest Leaf Bowl, an annual award show here in Washington State. I'm going to talk about that event again because it was a historic event for the Washington State cannabis industry. This was the first time that a licensed cannabis retailer had on-site sales at an event. So Commencement Bay Cannabis was the licensed cannabis retailer, and they are owned by the Puyallup tribe, and the event took place on tribal land. So the tribes all have separate compacts with the LCB, the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board, and they are able to push the limits a little bit, and we are thankful for that. The LCB and the prevention community have long stood in the way of reform here in Washington State, and like many states, we are trying to pass cannabis hospitality legislation that would allow for this type of thing to happen. Banquet style permits and events where cannabis is sold and consumed. So It was a great event, a wonderful example to see how it can be done and to show the LCB that there is nothing to be afraid of, and this would actually be a boost to our cannabis industry here in Washington State. Obviously, our cannabis industry is struggling as it is in many other states. So we're looking forward to the upcoming legislative session. I know ours just ended, but we are working hard, like I said, on cannabis hospitality, home grow again, working on some patient access bills, and working on a bill to restructure the Liquor and Cannabis Board completely so that we can move our industry forward. So that's what I've got for you this week out of Washington State. My name is Matthew, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
That'll do it for the B block, but we have many more state reports for you in the C block, including the latest from the state of Ohio, where legislators there continue to tinker with the already existing cannabis laws and regulations. We'll hear from Christina Brisson, and PCM TV founder Jimmy Young talks with one of the most successful lobbyists in Ohio, Tim Johnson. Cannabis Coast to Coast News continues after this.
I think the legislators' good intent, by the way, thanks for having me, Jimmy, but I think the legislators, they have good intention.
What if we're right? What if all of a sudden they discovered that there is medical use for marijuana and that it is good for you and it's better than alcohol and it's better than opioids and it helps your health? What if we're right? What if they find that out?
Specific cannabinoids have medical value. These are facts.
I'm here today in hopes to assist in removing the demonized stigma of cannabis and the perception that cannabis is just about getting high. The true base of this plant has to be known.
I don't think anybody should ever go to jail for cannabis. Get some medicine, and everybody should have access to it.
This is something which, at the very, very least, is the key to alleviating suffering and extending life for millions of human beings. Right? For returning some kind of balance to our society, and quite possibly of restoring our planet's natural balance as well.
Welcome back to Cannabis Coast to Coast News. This is the C block, or final section of our weekly roundup of cannabis news from around the world. This is also our last reminder to download the PCM TV app. That's where the first version of this complete news show is available first every week at 9 a.m. That's even 2 hours before we live stream it on our network of distribution platforms on Mondays. So just scan the QR code and that will take you right to the Google Play or App Store where you can download it for free. First up in the C block is our new District of Columbia reporter named Louis Joe. He runs a licensed delivery service in the district and has an interesting story that leverages the district's unique relationship with the federal government. Like everything with this new administration, nothing that has been in place since medical passed in 2014 is safe under President Trump. However, that hasn't stopped advocacy. Here's Louis with a story that could challenge that unique relationship DC has with Congress.
I'm Louis Joe with District Chronicles, owner of Green Guard, DC's first social equity and only licensed medical cannabis carrier. And today we're here with business owner Aaron Rogers and his lawyer, Lev Ivashko. Now, check his story out. They have a case. They originally went to court against the city of DC and the cannabis regulatory bodies for a zoning issue affecting Aaron's license. And now Aaron and his team, say they have a precedent in court for medical cannabis being legalized federally.
We were in federal court. The first question that the judge asked, by the way, it was Federal Judge Reyes. The first thing that Reyes said was, I didn't even review this. Why am I here? My attorney, Lev, of course, said, we think we're here because we have a zoning issue. We should be in, state court. We don't want to even be here, right? Essentially, I'm paraphrasing. But the key is the district attorney brought up, we're here to find out if our DC medical program fits due process, because we've raised due process concerns with regards to their law.
We were talking about, they didn't care. And they were like, you know what? Well, this is a federal action. If you want to bring it, we're going to dismiss it because marijuana is illegal here. Well, DC is a federal jurisdiction too, technically speaking, So that's what makes DC kind of like the moon, the next frontier of, if we can figure out what's happening here, this may actually lead to legalization of marijuana.
All those things, but to keep it on point means that a federal city is collecting revenues from a Schedule I drug, which I support, by the way. I think we should be doing this, go program. And moreover, that the program itself is federally legal to even be here by how they did it.
Now, I know what you're thinking. I thought it was supposed to be Aaron Rodgers, the NFL quarterback. No, not that Aaron Rodgers, but he is quarterbacking the medical cannabis community to ask the hard-hitting questions. DC is under federal jurisdiction, meaning the medical cannabis laws had to be approved by Congress. Now, in Aaron's case, a federal judge has upheld the medical cannabis program. What are the implications to this? Does this case set federal precedent for legalization nationally? Well, we're going to have to keep you updated, and we're going to have to find out right here, only on District Chronicles. Until next time, all facts, no smoke. I'm Louis Joe. Back to you, Alaina.
The cannabis legalization movement has another plant medicine that is garnering a lot of attention in the capital and political world. It's psilocybin, a psychedelic mushroom that has some powerful healing stories of its own, as more and more research has gone into its medicinal benefits. And now in Colorado, one of the oldest states to legalize adult use of cannabis, psilocybin laws are starting to ease. Xavier Jaillet has a look at the legislative action in his state on both plant medicines.
My name is Xavier Jaillet. I am chair of the Colorado chapter of the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce and an attorney at the McDonald Hopkins law firm. And here's what's happening in Colorado cannabis news this week. The Colorado legislature wrapped up its legislative session here in Colorado and passed a number of bills impacting the marijuana industry, typically allowing for less regulatory oversight and safeguards when it comes to operating such businesses. And I thought it'd be important to recap some of the bills impacting cannabis businesses here in Colorado that were passed this legislative session. A few of those bills focus on the way that taxes generated from marijuana sales are apportioned to certain state entities. One of those bills limited the amount of dollars that will be allocated to law enforcement programs focused on gray and black market marijuana activities, reducing those allocations by $3 million annually, while another bill reduces the amount of tax revenue allocated to the University of Colorado's medical development program that focuses on studying the impacts and effects of marijuana on medical patients. Those apportions will be reduced from 10 to 5% going forward. Now, another set of bills focuses more on the operational realities of being a cannabis business operator here in Colorado. One of those bills empowers the Marijuana Enforcement Division, Colorado's regulatory marijuana body, to pass additional rules and amend existing rules related to things like purchase limits, restricted areas for dispensaries, how dispensaries are supposed to identify and qualify patients and customers as being qualified to purchase marijuana, and some additional things related to retail dispensary operations here in Colorado. Another bill codifies and amends the rules related to research and development units, which are parts of cultivated marijuana or new formulations for branded products that are allowed to be distributed to certain qualified employees for research and development testing, basically quality control. And the bill further empowers those employees to receive research and development units to allow marijuana businesses to continue to perform quality assurance testing and research and development into new products, new cultivars, and things like that. And the final bill I thought that would be worth mentioning here is one that affects the ability for social equity delivery license holders here in Colorado to deliver marijuana to licensed and qualified patients and customers in their hotels. Previously, dispensaries or deliveries had to be made to residences, and this bill allows deliveries to be made to customers that are perhaps staying in a hotel here in Colorado, so long as those customers are indeed qualified to receive the products. Now, this marks a change here in Colorado that I think is a long time coming. Colorado has historically been a very progressive state when it comes to marijuana reform, but over the last decade, Colorado has somewhat fallen behind some other states, such as Minnesota, Michigan, or most recently Ohio, in what is allowed both by customers and by licensed businesses when it comes to dispensing marijuana. And so this set of bills helps the state catch up a little bit to the new normal and continue to be a leader when it comes to progressive reform in marijuana. That's it for Colorado Cannabis News this week. My name is Xavier, Jaillet, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Next up, we head out to Nevada, where there's always something going on in Las Vegas, the self-proclaimed adult playground. This week, Tina Tasaka was busy attending a Bitcoin convention and caught up with someone who claims she's put, quote, hemp on the moon. It's the Lady Space Rocket, and Tina got a chance to talk with her unique story from the moon to NASA via SpaceX. Here's Tina.
I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies, and this is the Nevada and Tribal Nations Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. North Carolina Governor Josh Stein signed an executive order this week creating a 24-member state advisory council on cannabis tasked with drafting recommendations by March 15th, 2026, and finalizing them by the end of the year. Among its members are representatives from state agencies, law enforcement, legislators, and notably the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, whose sovereign dispensary on tribal land has been selling recreational cannabis to adults 21 and over since opening last year around April 20th. Stein emphasized the need to tame the state's Wild West of unregulated hemp-derived THC products by establishing a legal, age-restricted market, expunging past convictions, safeguarding youth, and directing tax revenue toward public health and addiction services. The council's work could pave the way for legal medical and possibly recreational cannabis pending legislative approval. Mr. Tick Sigerbloom, chairman and Clark County commissioner, celebrated the 10th anniversary of cannabis dispensaries in Las Vegas with the return of Sigerbloom Haze at the Euphoria dispensary. Tick noted that over 10 years, legal cannabis has contributed $90 million to the county, which has used it for the homeless, and over $1 billion in taxes to the state, which has gone to schools. 10% of the sales of Sigerbloom Haze will go to the homeless in Nevada. That's it for the Nevada highlights and tribal nations. I'm Tina Tasaka with 420 Technologies and Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Reporting from Alabama, I'm Jennifer Boozer for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Today, I'm in Carbon Hill, Alabama, along the I-22 corridor in North Alabama, less than an hour outside of Birmingham. And I'm here to tour several locations for a brand new hempcrete project spearheaded by Vivicent Wellness Foundation. I am their new media director, so you'll be getting reports from me directly as the project progresses. The point of the project is to use sustainable hempcrete and repurposed shipping containers to provide affordable, sustainable housing in an area that was ravaged by tornadoes just a few years ago. In order to have industry come in, manufacturing jobs, there needs to be places for people to live. And we intend to create them. In an eco-friendly way, we're going to use hempcrete. We're going to grow hemp right here in Alabama and use it to build these houses to revitalize this area. In other news, HB 445, the hemp ban bill that was passed and signed into law by Governor Kay Ivey just a few weeks ago, has an update. Yesterday, the Attorney General, Steve Marshall, announced publicly that as of July 1st, smokable hemp flower will now carry a felony conviction, a Class C felony with up to 10 years. Buying street weed is a misdemeanor, so they are definitely bringing the war to the hemp industry in Alabama. We intend to fight it. We're just starting fundraising for a legal campaign to get an injunction, and we need a big win in Alabama so that we can help our friends in other southern states such as Texas and Tennessee beat it in their court systems as well. Stay tuned here every week. From Alabama, I'm Jennifer Boozer with Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
In Oklahoma this past weekend, Kimmie Cannabis, also known as Kimmie Hughes, was the moderator at a major cannabis event in her state that honored and featured other outstanding mothers who have advocated for their children to gain access to cannabinoid medicinal products. Here's Kimmie's Oklahoma report.
I am Kimmie Cannabis from Can I Talk About It with the Oklahoma Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. The Women in Weed movement, founded by Gina Acosta, hosted a powerful event at the historic Farmers Public Market in Oklahoma City, breaking the stigma around motherhood and cannabis. 3 dynamic panels came together to share truth, science, and lived experience, proving that cannabis and motherhood are not contradictions, but conversations long overdue. I had the honor of moderating one of those panels. Panelists opened up about choosing cannabis while leading in the Christian church, living with rare disease, and navigating pregnancy with the plant as medicine. We heard from a holistic doula, a mother of a minor cannabis patient, and a minor patient who shared their experience using cannabis in school to manage seizures. Also featured at the event was attorney Rachel Klubeck, who delivered a serious warning about 2 proposed laws targeting pregnant women who use cannabis medicine. HB 1750 would criminalize use during pregnancy, even with a valid OMA card. House Bill 2737 would redefine neglect to include the use of medical cannabis during pregnancy, again, even with a card. Rachel warned that if these bills pass, pregnant women will not be safe and could face DHS involvement or worse. She strongly advised women to have a plan in place and document everything in case they are forced to defend themselves legally. This event was more than a panel, it was a movement, and these women are breaking barriers and redefining motherhood and standing in their power. That's it for your Oklahoma update. Peace, love, and all that good stuff.
Next up, the state of Ohio's never-ending battle in the state house since adult use was voted into law in 2023, with 57% voters supporting it. Sales began in August of last year, and the legislature has been making changes to the law ever since. Christina Brisson is our state correspondent in that state, but Tim Johnson is in the trenches at the State House every week as a lobbyist and advocate in Ohio. The former law enforcement veteran is involved with weekly hearings in Columbus, and this week, executive producer Jimmy Young talked with Tim about some of the most recent changes to the cannabis laws in that state.
Thanks a lot, Alaina. Yes, indeed. There's always something new and different going on in the state of Ohio when it comes to reform, rules, and regulations. And when it comes down to those 3 things, we go to one guy. It's Tim Johnson. He's a regular lobbyist in that Ohio state. He's been there since the beginning, and we so appreciate him taking time to join us every once in a while to kind of set it straight. So, Tim, a lot of movement now in the State House of Ohio down in Columbus. What's the latest? And it does sound like that the legislators are trying to make revisions, but I do think they're trying to make it the right way so the industry can survive. Is that accurate?
I think the legislators' good intent. By the way, thanks for having me, Jimmy. But I think the legislators, they have good intention to protect and build a sustainable, vertically integrated business or industry in Ohio, commercial industry. I believe that's the thing. But one of the problems that they're suffering from right now is the backdoor meetings, the hallway meetings and so forth, where the license holders themselves, certain license holders, not all of them, some of the big ones and their trade association are actually pushing back against issue 2. the vote, and they were the ones that put it on the ballot. The people didn't put it on there. They put it on the ballot, and we passed it. And now it's all of a sudden short, sweet, and brief. It seems, and it's documented. So I'm not talking, just out of the air. It's documented. They're actually trying to criminalize legalization, which makes no sense. So you do not legalize something to criminalize it. The idea is to decriminalize it. So that's kind of short and brief. That's what we see happening right now.
And it's not an easy issue to handle because you have that Farm Bill of 2018 that was so poorly worded, and it put so much emphasis on the FDA coming up with regulations, and they just didn't want to have anything to do with it. So they did what so many people, as I've learned in our government, do sometimes, is they just put it off and just delay and just not do anything, have no action on it, if you will. Right. And now you've got a $1 billion hemp industry, and you've got a $1 billion cannabis Delta 9 industry, if you will. I don't like to use the M word. I think I've explained that in the past. But is Ohio, are they able to grasp this? And of course, and then at the federal level now, the whole news item from this week is that the feds in a committee are trying to ban all THC infused cannabis products. And again, that's going to piss off even more people, isn't it?
You can't ban that. If you ban it, you just go back to prohibition. That's all. You can't pull out a compound out of the plant and it's never present. It's a natural occurrence, So that can't happen. So I do know. I'm not sure as far as the Jim Jordan bill, what he's up to. He's behind what Ohio's already doing. If he's trying to do it for votes, he's doing it for votes. But if he's trying to do it for Ohio, he needs to catch up with reality. We're way ahead of what he's trying to do already in Ohio. So I think that the movement forward with Ohio, as far as that separation, we're looking at it properly. We have created a new agency within the Department of Commerce that will handle primarily, the hemp separation of the hemp retail, and it looks like they may be redoing the regulations for licensing and so forth in hemp. And then we're also hopefully, probably in the fall, we'll be introducing a industrial hemp bill so that it'll be its own standalone program.
Right.
So we still have, we've gotten rid of our pharmacy board, except for the ORS reports that covers the medical patients. But the Division of Cannabis Control, if they just let Jim Canepa do his job, Jim was doing very good with what he was doing and promulgating the rules off of issue 2. So they need to step aside and just let it happen.
I'm Christina Brisson with Over the Top Renovations with your weekly Ohio Cannabis Report with Cannabis Coast to Coast News. As of June 4th, recreational sales limits have increased from 2.5 ounces every 9 days to 2.5 ounces every day. And Jim Belushi's bringing his own cannabis brand to Ohio through his partnership with Bloom Dispensaries. So welcome, Belushi Farms. But of course, all this is coming as Senate Bill 56 is trying to push through its agenda, which you'll recall I talked about last week, and we talked about how it's going to make more issues with criminalization. This will recriminalize purchases of cannabis flower that's anywhere from not your homegrown or not a dispensary, as well as it'll eliminate gifting and criminalize use in non-moving vehicles. Let's hope this does not get pushed through. Stand up, Ohio. I am Christina Brisson with Over the Top Renovations with Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
This week, we welcome another newcomer to the Cannabis Coast to Coast News team. Her name is Robin Alford, and she is a medical patient in her home state of Kentucky. In 2023, Governor Andy Beshear signed the law to allow medical cannabis to be available to patients who need it. That program launched in January of this year, but like all new markets, has had a few hiccups along the way, especially in a state where the whiskey and bourbon industries are so entrenched in the culture. Here's Robin's Kentucky Cannabis Report.
Hello, my name is Robin Alford, and I'm bringing you the Kentucky Cannabis News. Governor Beshear helped break ground on the first medical cannabis safety compliance facility in the Commonwealth. With a roughly $1 million investment, State 33 LLC will employ around a dozen Kentuckians. The new safety compliance facility will be one of 7 in the state, dedicated to ensuring the safety and quality of medical cannabis products. Team Kentucky has confirmed locations for 39 of the 48 planned dispensaries throughout the state. The Office of Medical Cannabis has launched a dispensary directory so cardholders can see how close dispensaries will be to them. To find a dispensary that will be open near you, visit kymedcan.ky.gov. Patients were able to start applying for medical cannabis cards on January 25th. Since that time, 10,224 medical cannabis cards have been issued, along with 15,108 written certifications. To ensure Kentuckians are not paying for a card they cannot use in 2025, today Governor Beshear signed an executive order that waives the 2026 renewal application fee for any Kentuckian that received a card in 2025. And that is all for now. This is Robin. Everybody calls me Rockin' Robin, so come back at you later.
And finally, this week, a surprising development in the makeup of the typical consumer of cannabis. The history of the prejudicial stigma towards the plant medicine is changing. Science, research, and overwhelming anecdotal evidence has shown this plant has been misunderstood for over 100 years in this country and around the world. And now, with more than half of the adult population in the United States having access to cannabis in the 24 states who have legalized adult use programs, the typical consumer is a lot older than many people thought. Researchers studied the data compiled by the National Survey on Drug Use between 2021 and 2023 and concluded that seniors have enjoyed an increase in their regular use by 40%. Now, regular use does not mean grandma and grandpa are waking and baking. It is defined as once a month use. What this really means is that many older Americans have discovered the powerful medicinal benefits of the plant that can help with sleep issues and chronic pain maintenance. Our resident senior executive producer, Jimmy Young, can certainly attest to that. And that's why he came up with a saying, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Consume it responsibly. That will do it for this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Alaina Pinto. We will see you next week.
I think I messed up. Did you know there's a place that covers all the cannabis news you need? Welcome to Pro Cannabis Media, your go-to for all things cannabis. PCM is the CNBC of weed, bringing you the latest news and talk shows with a twist. We've got 16 state correspondents and multimedia journalists from around the US and Canada.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones with Big Green Distribution with the Missouri Cannabis Report.
I'm Karen Black from Greenfinger Consulting with the Arizona Cannabis Report.
I'm Amy Carter from Michigan Weedsters.
Andrew Behringer here reporting from Washington, D.C.
Debbie Fazy with the Canadian Toke of the Week.
It all started back in 2018 when founder Jimmy Young kicked off the In the Weeds podcast. His mission? Documenting the fight to end cannabis prohibition. Fast forward to today and we've got Cannabis Coast to Coast with Alaina Pinto, delivering the nation's only TV-style cannabis news show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Cannabis Coast to Coast, PCM TV's weekly roundup of industry news from California to New York. I'm Alaina Pinto.
As of August 2024, PCM has racked up over 1.2 million views and 14.5 million impressions on our YouTube channel. With 15,000 subscribers and growing, our reach is spreading like wildfire. PCM's website, YouTube, Rumble, Discord, Roku, Twitch, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and even our very own PCM TV app. Get your cannabis news fix with Pro Cannabis Media. We're here to keep you informed and entertained. Stay tuned and stay lifted.